Episode 1 of Lord Marksman and Vanadis begins with setting up the premise of the series. Everything begins abruptly and the viewers are expected to pick up the pieces. Tigre Vorn, the protagonist of the anime, one of Brunei's soldiers and Earl of Alsace, one of Brunei's territories, survived the disastrous defeat in Dinant Plains by managing to escape. Tigre tried to murder Elen, the female protagonist of the series, and also one of the 7 Vanadis in the anime, with his arrow shot when he noticed the Vanadis from a distance, but all of his attacks were deflected by the Vanadis, leading to his capture. Tigre was woken up by Lim, Elen's bodyguard and BFF. Tita, Tigre's childhood mate and friend, was shocked to learn about Tigre's takedown and a hefty ransom for his release from Bertrand and Masha's in Alicia's Thorn Manor. Meanwhile, in Leap Merites, our main character missed 2 arrow shots because Rurik gave him poor quality arrows. When Elen used Arafar's wind power to halt a murder attempt, Tigre managed to oppress the assassin by striking an arrow into his foot from an incredible distance, even with a sluggish bow. Elen issued an apology to Tigre while preparing to execute Rurik and the other musketeers for their lack of respect, which Tigre thought was exaggerated and begged Elen to forgive Rurik and the others. Then, Tigre learned to adapt to life in Leap Merites. He also became popular among Rurik and others. However, some peers still hated him. Tigre was thinking about Elen's phrases when Rurik informed him of a captured invader who appeared to be Bertrand, Tigre's loyal caretaker. Then, Tigre's fellowship with the people of Leap Merites was cut short when Bertrand told him that the Thenardier army was massing 3,000 soldiers for Alsace, much to Tigre's surprise and anger. That is when Tigre decided to go back to Alsace. Despite Rurik's pleas, Tigre continued to insist on proceeding to Leap Merites' gate, only to be confronted by Elen, who asked him where he was going in the dead of night. Tigre told Elen to stand aside without permission. This is where the episode ends, and that's a lot to take in. Episode 2 begins with the introduction of Zion, the antagonist, who has been the one to deploy 3,000 soldiers and head towards Alsace for the attack, alongside 2 dragons. Then, before leaving Leap Merites, Tigre asks Elen if they should lend him a few soldiers for his rescue. She agreed, but in return, she asked to rule Alsace. Tigre agreed to the terms, but insisted that she treat Alsace as her own. Citizens in Alsace began their escape to the outskirts of the region, while Tita led the susceptible peers to a municipal shrine. Mashas revealed his plans to save Alsace. While he sought a way to halt the Ganelon army from moving forward, Bertrand would convey his message to Tigre, whereas Tita stayed to help the Alsace citizens in their evacuation. While remaining in Vorn Manor, Tita remembers Tigre's promise that he will return safely. The Thenardier army barged into Alsace, looting whatever goods they could find. To his surprise, Zion discovered that Alsace was deserted, with the only residents being the shrine refugees. Though frustrated by his inability to attack which was so holy that even Thenardier wouldn't touch it, Zion turned his attention to Vorn Manor. Tita confronted Zion in the manor and pleaded with him to leave, and started chasing Tita through the balcony. Then Tigre shows up and impales Zion's hand with his arrow. Tita was overcome with joy upon seeing Tigre's return and meeting his new ally. Tigre's hand was scratched as he saved Tita from assassination, and Tita tore her dress to wrap up his wounds. Tigre realized his bow was broken from the previous retaliation when the Leap Merites army began their pursuit of Zion and his troops, and Tita foisted the Vorn Black Bow upon him. At the same time, Bertrand commented that the family treasure, like his late father Urs, had been entrusted to the young Earl. Episode 3 begins with the Leap Merites army struggling to find Zion and the rest of his soldiers. According to Tigre, Zion and his troops were most likely recuperating on the Molshem Plains. Elen saw it as a chance to crush the enemy while they prepared. Then, at the Molshem Plains, Tigre and his army came across an Earth Dragon. The dragon had halted their venture. Elen decided to confront the dragon herself. She managed to slay the dragon. While grieving the loss of a dragon, Zion learned that 2,000 reinforcements had arrived, prompting him to retreat completely. Then, Zion curses Tigre for betraying Brunei. Tigre told Zion that he would never be forgiven for his deeds. After this, the two engage in a duel, in which Zion ends up getting hurt. Just as Tigre was ready to fire the last blow, he was interrupted by Thenardier and the Leap Merites army. Zion attempted to flee with his dragon. A voice from the Black Bow abruptly urged Tigre to jump the target. While initially baffled, Tigre decided to notch his arrow using Arafar's wind as help, and aimed for Zion. The arrow was shot with incredible speed, slaying both Zion and the dragon in mid-flight. Alsace was thus saved in the hands of Tigre and his allied forces. Episode 4 is where things get really interesting. Tita begins the day by criticizing Tigre and Elen's method of rousing the younger men. Then Tita and Tigre set out to inspect a commune under his command. It clarified that the armies of Thenrandir and Ganelon had retreated to regroup, and at House Thenardir they planned to kill Tigre with a blatant band of assassins and fight Elen with a war maiden. Back in Zeechid, Elen is chastised by Victor, the king of Zeechid. Sophia Obertas, another Vanadis, intervenes to reduce the punishment she would face. She tries to explain that Brune has no desire of involving Zeechid in their civil war, but that if they ask, they will be able to respond. That the situation is always in charge. Elen returns outside and meets Ludmilla Lori, another Vanadis with whom she has a feud. Sophia intervenes to prevent them from fighting. She gives thanks to Sophia for rescuing her from the viewing public chamber. Then Moshes goes on to ask Tigre what he plans to do, and he says he will fight Duke Thenardier but will not support Duke Ganelon. He claims he is obliged to protect Alsace and would do so even if he was not. While on their way to a new location, Ludmilla tells Tigre that he has no chance of winning because of Duke Thenardier's vast network of allies, which involves her. Before they can say anything else, they come to a halt before hitting a wire trap and are attacked by assassins. Tigre attempts first aid after Lim is bitten by a venomous snake. Ludmilla, on the other hand, annihilates all of the assassins, and the group splits up, with Elen and Tigre riding off with the injured Lim and Ludmilla seeking medical attention. The episode ends after that. The fifth episode begins with Tigre getting a glimpse of Milla naked. Then, as an apology, Tigre treats Milla to his famous soup. Then, Elen ordered Lim to dispatch her soldiers for Leitmeritz. Then, Milla led her forces to fight Leitmeritz, just as Elen predicted, while Thenardier tried to attack Alsace once more. Even with a negotiated peace envoy letter from Tigre, Milla refused, insisting on her attack notwithstanding her general concerns. Both armies fought in the Burkina Plains, but neither won, resulting in hundreds of fatalities. Elen then mobilized her army and began to invade Mila's castle in the Tatra Mountains, only to be forced back due to severe weather and the formidable defenses of Tatra Castle. Despite Lim's protests, the Silver-Winged Vanadis persisted in assaulting Tatra Fortress until Tigre mentioned probing around the mountains for a shortcut. While scouting, Tigre comes across Milla, who was hunting a fox. They both chat until sunrise. When she leaves, Tigre tracks her footprints, which lead him to the Tatra Castle. Elen and the Leitmeritz army followed Tigre's link, only to discover that its security had been toughened, and Elen attempted a futile attempt to breach the gateways. Tigre narrowly escaped an archer's attack and asked Arafar for help in breaking down the gate. Tatra Castle's gateways were damaged by Elen and Tigre's merged powers, and Elen flocked her army to siege the castle. Elen battles Mila after demolishing the rear entrance to the Tatra fortress. However, the last individual of the Seven Chains assassins interrupts this, only to be brutally murdered by Tigre. Mila comes to realize Tigre is not only the bear hunter she met previously, but he also only seeks to defend Alsace. Mila declares her impartiality and thanks for Tigre keeping her alive, effectively ending the fight. Then, Roland, the bearer of the legendary sword Durandal, obtains a royal degree to murder Tigre on the western border of the Brunei Kingdom. The Leitmeritz army and the Alsace army form an uncomfortable coalition known as the Silver Meteor Storm in the region territory. Sophie, a conciliatory envoy sent by Brunei Prime Minister Pierre Baudouin, enters the army site and notifies Tigre that he has been charged with treason. Sophie tells Elen where the remaining 4 war maidens are. While Hughes and Tigre struggle to keep their alliances loyal, the Navarre kingdoms come forward, and Roland dismisses all parley offers. The Silver Meteor Storm continues to suffer heavy losses during the Battle of Orange. Tigre is also gravely wounded while saving Elen from Roland's attack. In the 7th episode, Sophie appears and utilizes her Geralt, a pastor staff named Zot, to repel on-rushing Navarre knights, then vanishes once Tigre and Elen are safe. The Navarre knights abandon their pursuit when Mashas and his army units arrive. Mashas asserts that he cannot meet with the King Theron in the army barracks, despite the fact that Baudouin notified Mashas that Theron's well-being is dicey. With Tigre still barely conscious, Elen vows to gain the upper hand, and Sophie offers to assist her. Tigre is then given instructions by the Black Bow and accompanied by Tita to a mystical temple belonging to Tir Nathal, the goddess of darkness, night, and death. Tigre needs to shoot Tita in a test of fortitude for greater power when Tita is possessed. He uses this power to ensure that the arrow doesn't really harm Tita, allowing the temple to vanish. The Silver Meteor Storm turns the plains into a bog. making the Navarre Knights easy targets. Tigre shoots Roland with his newfound force after arriving at the battleground despite reopening his injuries. Roland barely escapes with his life and embraces defeat. The battle is over with half of the Navarre Knights dead. When the Navarre Knights return to Brunei's western frontier to fortify its defenses, Roland pays a visit to Nice for the king. Despite Tigre and Masha's warnings, while also trying to present Durandal as a symbol of alliance. Unfortunately, before he could meet Farron, Ganelon's arrangement traps Roland inside of a room, and as punishment for having failed to defeat Tigre's army, he is stung to death by extremely corrosive bees. I would make a Nick Cage joke here, but this story's already convoluted enough. Elen had to travel to Langisa to assist Sasha, a friend of Vanadis who had written an urgent letter requesting assistance in repelling a Vanadis attack on Langisa. Brunei became even more susceptible after Roland's death, as Mosinel began its incursion by capturing Angie's residents as slaves and ruining the village. While Thénardier's army continues to advance to oppose the invading army, Tigre leads the Silver Meteor army against their southern intruders. Rurik and Tigre noticed the slaves were heavily guarded during their scouting mission, and they also saved a girl named Rain. Then Kashim, the foreign invaders' colonel, ordered his 3,000 soldiers to decimate his enemy's 200 soldiers in the late evening, only to fall into the Silver Meteor Army's shadow military trap. Following morning, Tigre initiated another ambush against the Mosinel army, slowly reducing them from 20,000 to 18,000 men. Enraged, Kashim resorted to executing 10 slaves in order to entice the Silver Meteor army and Tigre to flee. When Tigre and the 600 Brunei soldiers arrived, Kashim did not believe Tigre was the military commander until the ambush by the Zikchid army. Tigre killed Kashim with his arrow. With Kashim's death, the Silver Meteor army triumphed, and the slaves were set free. However, their win was cut short when they received word that the main army of 30,000 was on its way to them. Tigre and his longbow unit went to repel their army's advance, but their tenacity was too much for Tigre and his longbow unit. Then Mila and her army came to the rescue. Lim and Elen arrived at Langisa. Sasha told Elen about everything that was going on in Langisa, especially Lisa's attack on Langisa due to a conspiracy between her and the bandits. Elen chose to find Lisa in Borosolo for the sake of her friend. In the meantime, in Agnes, Mila formed an alliance with the Silver Meteor army and told her strategy for defeating the Mosinel army. Tigre was skeptical of Mila's strategies, but he was willing to give them a shot. Corrèze, the top general of the Mosinel army, divided his army into 7 battalions, each attempting to defend the convoy, to counter the Silver Meteor army's surprise attack. Ormea hills began to snow as Tigre vowed to win the fight, and the Battle of Ormea was just about to begin. 40,000 troops from the Mosinel army show up at the Ormea hills, where the Silver Meteor storm has established a small fortress on the first hill. During the War of Ormea, the Mosinel army is divided into 7 divisions by Corrèze. Whilst decoying refugees dominate the 1st through 4th divisions of the fortress, Mila and Tigre lead an ambush against the 6th and 5th divisions on the 2nd hill. When attempting to attack the 7th Division, Mila and Tigre are surrounded. When allied knights Auguste, Shei, and Emile arrive to help the Silver Meteor storm, Mila and Tigre are strengthened. Despite the fact that reinforcements have increased to 5,000 men, another 3,000 men, led by Mashas and Hughes, arrive, forcing Corrèze to fall back and regroup. Corrèze makes the decision to withdraw after learning that the Mosinel fleet left behind to strike Brunei Kingdom's southern harbor has been sunk by Thénardier, and sends his intimate congratulations to Tigre via envoy. The Malasha and Elen return to Mila and Tigre, causing Mila and Elen to disagree once more. Elen and Tigre discuss the fight that night, and Tigre vows to never forget those who fought and died for him. In the next episode, we see Tina, the Vanadis of Osterode, entering Tigre's bedroom via the Azendius' portal. Elen tells Mila to depart while thanking her for saving Tigre from the Mosinel army's incursion on the roof, but Mila begins to decline. Later, Rain messes up a council meeting with Lim. Tigre and Mashas, and much to everyone's surprise, reveals herself to be the rumored dead Prince Renas. Then, Tigre makes the decision to bring Rain to Arteship to prove her royal lineage as one of Brunei's highborn ladies, as there is a caravan there that only the royal family knows how to enter, trying to prove her heritage. Then, somewhere within Brunei, Thénardier is thrilled to see Drevok's 5 dragons in front of it, 2 of which are enchanted with potent magical chains. And in the meantime, inside of his room in Lutetia, Ganelon begins to predict the final battle between Thénardier and Tigre, and plans to give them a goodbye gift to whoever discovered Lutetia. Meanwhile, Sophie is called up by King Victor to return to Brunei. In Brunei, news of Montauban's fall to Thenardier military might and Ardashim's fire has managed to reach the Silver Meteor army, prompting Tigre to urge Rain to rush to Ardashim. At Vincennes Plains, the Thenardier army and the Silver Meteor army are fighting fiercely against one another, with Mila and Elen fighting against the dragons and others fighting off the major forces. Mila and Elen successfully slaughtered the first 3 earth dragons with their Vanadis, but the remaining dragons demonstrate to be more difficult to defeat. The night concludes in a tie. The following day, Mila and Elen use the same strategy to defeat the 2 magical dragons. They place their faith in Tigre to thwart the main army as they rest against each other next to the blood-soaked carcasses of their slain foes. In the next episode, Tigre tells Mila, Rain, Tita, Elen, and Limalisha that they should go to Ardashim after Elen wakes him up with bloodlust. Rain tells everyone that there are 3 ways to get to the Holy Grotto, and they opt for the second, which takes them through the Moshe Temple. Rurik, Rain, Elen, Tigre, and Bertrand learned that Thenardier and his men took a different route by entering the caverns through a hidden passageway beneath the temple. During the battle, Thenardier dispatches his second-in-command, Stade, to pursue Rain and Tigre, while Elen confronts Thenardier. As the cavern begins to fall, Thenardier decides to flee. Stade, on the other hand, continues the chase after Tigre. While Rurik, Rain, and Elen flee, Bertrand saves Tigre. Tigre runs towards Bertrand, who expresses how fortunate he was to serve Tigre before dying. Rain and Elen rush back to Ardashim, where Elen discovers Tigre alive and Bertrand dead. As the final battle with Thenardier comes, the Silver Meteor Storm's leaders begin to think if Tigre will be able to overcome Bertrand's murder. Tigre had used a black bow to shoot through the solid rock and establish the pit, according to a flashback. Tigre regains his composure after Elen tells him that she found joy when she started out as a simple bounty hunter. They then discuss the construction of a trade route connecting Leitmeritz and Alsace. Badouin pays a visit to the army barracks, informing them that Farron has been poisoned several times by Ganelon, but has managed to regain his wits. Because Stade no longer orders the Thenardier army, the battle favors the Silver Meteor Storm during the Battle of Mariville. When faced with Thenardier, Tigre brings a single arrow and pulls it from his bow after Elen brings him back to his senses. Thenardier charges Tigre, who shoots him out of his seat through the forehead. The Silver Meteor Storm is celebrated as a hero by the Prince of Nice. Farron accepts Tigre's conditions for tranquility and acknowledges Rain as his heir. He also bestows on Tigre the title of Knight of the Moonlight, which is traditionally bestowed on the future leader of Brunei. Unfortunately, Farron dies a few days later, and Rain rises to the throne. Tita and Tigre return to Leitmeritz and work on the trade route that will be in the spring. The last episode ends with that, and that's the end of the video. I think this is what happens when you try to shove an entire Lord of the Rings series into a single season of anime. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.
And I'm pretty sure that you are.